Each Gimel. And the Rebbe quoted from the Tanya that a Yid that does an Aveda is worse than the Klippa and Sitra Achra because they call Hashem the God of God. But by doing an Aveda, you're rebelling against Hashem. You're not even at the level of the Klippas and Sitra Achra because they don't rebel against Hashem, but the person is violating, is going the will of Hashem. So the Rebbe is going to explain now why do we say that saying Elokad Elakayo, calling Hashem the God of gods, is not considered violating the will of Hashem. That means that you're saying that there's somebody else. That in itself should be a violation. Just to say that's Avodah Zarah, it would seem like, because you're saying there's other gods. Hashem is not the only God. He is the God of the gods. Elokod, Elokaya, he's in charge. But they say there's other people in charge as well. The Rebbe will explain that Goyim, B'nai Noyach, are not obligated in the mitzvah of Yichud. They're not obligated against Shituf. Only a Yid who says Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. A Shema Yisrael Hashem Echad, that there's only one Eberster, one Mitzias, as the Rebbe will explain, that the Yidden connect to the level of Seviv Kol Almin, which doesn't allow for any other Mitzias. That's why their Mitzvah, they're instructed for Yichud, only Hashem. But the nations of the world, if they bring in other gods, that's not for them. That's not their mitzvah. They're not violating the will of Hashem. Let's look inside. Gimel. Move on. It's not understood. Masha Kosuv. The Alter Rebbe writes that the person who violates an Aveda who nifrad yoiser mahaklipa v'sitra achra. He is more separated from Hashem than the klipa sitra achra. Mishum shehem einam oivrim al rotzon hamelech. And the reason is they are not violating the will of the king. V'korulei, and they call Hashem Eloko, the Elokayo, the God of God. So that means that they're not violating the will of Hashem. But why is that? Isn't this that they're calling him the God of gods? That is idol worship. That's the strange service of believing that there's other powers in the world besides Hashem. They give dominance, they attribute power, dominance to the stars and the constellations, or to the sorim above, that they give them powers, they attribute power to them. By attributing power to the Kechavim Azolos, to the Sorim, they're violating the wishes of the Supreme. Blessed be. Being Cain, and in that case, since even saying Elokod Elokai is violating the Ratzon HaElyon, Lama ha'odom ha'iver avedo garua mehem. So how come we're saying that a yid, a person who violates, doesn't have Aveda, is worse than them? They're also violating because they're saying Elokod Elokaya. That's a violation of the will of Hashem as well. And the Rebbe is going to explain now, but for them, for the Bnei Noach, that's not considered a violation because they're not instructed on the Yichud Hashem. But the idea is the Elokod Elokaya hu inyan hashituf. Elokod Elokaya, when we say the God of the gods, what it is that is participation. That's shituf, that's partnership, which means they say Elokod Elokaya, that Hashem God forbid, has a partner, has shituf, Allah shituf, muzharim Yisrael davke. But only Yidden are warned against per- participation, that there's anything else besides Hashem. That's only Yisrael davke. But veloi b'nei Noach, but not the sons of Noach, not ordinary people, not Yidden are not commanded. Ukemeshikosuv horamo, as the Ramo writes, and it's also become a mekoimis, and also many places. V'chein mashma meha Rambam, and that's the way it also seems from the Rambam, b'Sefer HaMitzvahs. In Sefer HaMitzvahs, Shekoisev, the Rambam writes that where do we know the mitzvah of Yichud? Shekosav, he writes that Hora ala Yichud u'mahakosuf, that where is the warning? Where does Hashem warn us that you know that there's only Hashem? Is from the pasuk of Shema Yisrael, Hashem goyim echad. The pasuk that says Hashem is one, that tells us that there's only Hashem, nothing else. The mizeh mashma, since the pasuk is talking specifically Shema Yisrael, so from this it appears shebnei Noach einam ein muzharim alzeh, that the bnei Noach aren't warned on shituf. Because if this is the source from which we know that we can only believe only Hashem, Yichud, only Hashem, nothing else, in this pasuk we learn it from Shema Yisrael. But this pasuk in Amar Yisrael Davke, it says Yisrael. So this is a mitzvah. It appears in the Sefer HaMitzvahs, since he quotes this pasuk as the source for against participation on the onlyness that Hashem is Yichud by himself from the pasuk. That's a mitzvah for the Yiddish. Mashma, that's the way that Rambam also holds that this prohibition, that the violation against one Hashem, but participation does not apply to non-Yisrael. Why is that? So the Rebbe is going to explain that the Yidden have a connection to Seviv Kol Almim, in which there is no room for anything else besides Hashem, as opposed to the Bnei Noach, they have a connection to others as well, to Memale Kol Almim. Look inside. Who it is the B'Hachayis Alikisha B'Ilomis Yesh Bezer Fanichayis. In the godly light, the vitality that is in the world, there is two types of vitality of energies. We have Memale Kol Almin, we have the energy in Hashem that fills the world, comes down in an inner according to the various levels of the world. And then we have his Sovev Kol Almin, and that which surrounds the world, which is all places equal. Shachai is the Memale Kol Almim, the vitality of Memale that fills the world, Huba, Bihislapshus Ba'ilamais. That comes dressed up in the world. Kamai Merazal, as our sages of blessed memory say, Ma HaNeshama Memale Esaguf, Kacha Kodesh Baruch Hu Memale Esa'olam. Just like the soul fills the body, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu fills the world. So this is talking about the Oir HaMemale Kulam. What's the comparison between the Neshama filling the body and Hashem filling the world? Behind one, that is. Just like the open energy, vitality that dresses up in the body. What we see in the body openly, that comes divided up according to the ways of the limbs. The energy of the soul provides an energy for each limb according to its its abilities. Each Aver gets its unique uh, chayis, which is unique powers that is specifically molded and designed for that Aver. The eine doime hachayis shebe Aver zeh. There is not the same, it's not compared. The energy that comes down, the life force that comes in one limb, lahachayis shebe Aver achar, to the vitality of another limb. The mitzad hashinui sheyesh behevorim, because there is a change in the limbs. Yesh shinui gam b'achayis. There's also a change in the energy that comes to that limb. So we see that's the neshama, the way it's memali the guf, that there is a change of chayis. Um'achar shehachayis mishtana lifi oifen hevorim. So since the energy changes according to the ways of the limbs, so it's understood that the body takes up room for this energy. That's why he changes, meaning the connection of the neshama, of the vitality of the neshama with that limbs interchanges. The body has hold. It's important to it because it changes according to the body. So the body is teifes mokim, takes up space, meaning it's important to, and it has relative to this chayis, legabe chayis relative to this chayis. L'chein hu mishtan lefeifen evorim. That's why it changes according to the limbs. Since it takes up space relative to the chayis, to the energies, so even though the limb feels the energy that comes from the neshama and is subjugated to the energy, but still, he's not bottled from his whole existence, because the chayis also allows for this aver. It adjusts itself to that aver. This is the comparison. Just like the soul fills the body, that Hashem fills the world. The same thing understood, the light that fills the world. That he dresses up in the world. The subjugation, the self-negation of the creations to that level of energy. It's not totally a nullification from subjugation, that you're no entity. That's when we talk about the light of Memalikulam. Opposed to when we talk about the light which surrounds all worlds. And likewise, when we talk about the energy, the energy which is not open, not like the neshama, which is memale, but there is an energy in the body which is not open. It's hidden. That's relative to the Eir HaSevev, the created being take up no room at all. It is not important to them. It doesn't exist in them. So the way this energy is in the world, although they grasp, they realize that there is the vitality of Seviv Kulam, but they don't feel it. So that would be the fact that there is Ein Sof. They don't feel it. They know, they don't feel it. Is Kimoi B'Ha'inyan Dis Havas Yesh Me'ayin. Just like when there is a creation, when something comes from nothing, Yesh Me'ayin, Sheha'ayin Hu B'Helam. When we say Yesh Me'ayin, the Ayin, the level of creation, the level of ayin is hidden. You don't see it. It's yesh. All what we see is a yesh because it says from nothing. But it's not really from nothing. Everything comes from something. But that oir, the energy that vitalizes, is ayin, is nothing because it doesn't feel it. The av shayesh yudeyu masi sheyeshne ha'ayin hamahava oisei. For although the yesh knows and grasps that there is the ayin that creates him, otherwise he wouldn't be here. But mikol mokim eine margishes ayin. But he doesn't feel the ayin lefishu behelam because it's hidden. That's the level of Sefer Kulalmin. The level of Memalu Kulalmin we feel it's a yesh, it's a bit of a yesh, and the level of of the is Memalu Kulalmin is in a way a bit of a mitzvah. Now, because the Yidden, the Rebbe will explain, because the Yidden have a shayches to the level of Sefer Kulalmin and Bnei Noach to Memalu Kulalmin, that's the difference. Why only Yidden were instructed not to do shituf against shituf Mashen Kain the nations, Mashen the Bnei Noach. Dalet. Bapizeh Yuvon, based on this, we'll understand Mashadavki Yisrael Huzuru ala shituf v'loy Bnei Noach. Why specifically only the Yidden have been warned against participation, another giving powers to something else besides Hashem, but not Bnei Noach. The Hinei, but not the Bnei Noach. They are allowed to. Hinei Yisrael, Neshamas Yisrael, Mushroshim Ba'atzmus. The Jewish souls are rooted in Atzmus. So that's always a high level in Atzmus itself. Ulamatum is but on a lower level, even Ba'ir Hashem of Kulam, in the light which surrounds the world. Since in that madrega of Sefer Kulalmim, ein shum nisinas mokim al eze inyan levada lakus, there is no room, no space for nothing, any idea besides godliness. Lachein ma'minim, that's why Yidden believe, she'ein oid, there's nothing in addition. It's only Hashem, there's nothing else. It's not only that there's no God besides Hashem. There's no entity besides Hashem. So there's nothing besides Hashem. For sure, there's no matter that has any form of dominance and ruling. Of course not. There's no entity b'chlal. So certainly there's now powers. The kol zeh, all this who lefisha shorsham in madrega kazu. The reason is because they're rooted in such a level. Over there is no room for any entity at all. That's why they were commanded not to have shituf, not to attribute power to anything else besides only Hashem. There's no other thing, no other mitzias. As opposed to the nation of the world, they don't have a connection to the Erasevim. They're rooted from the externality of Hashem's will. So that's the level of Memali, not the Kedua, the Neshamas Yisrael, Shorsham Mipnim Yisrael, the root of the Yidden, of the souls of Yidden, that's from the inner will. And the nations of the world are rooted in the externality of Hashem's will. The Kamoi, when we say what is the inner will and the external will, Yidden are the inner will of Hashem. The Umas Ha'olam are rooted external will of Hashem. What's the difference between the inner and the external will? Let's look by a person. The Kamoi Shalamata Ba'odam, just like it is below by the person. Pnimius Harotzin, Hu Bedover Shu Ba'atzmai Hu Hatachlis. The inner of the will is in such a matter that is the goal. So I want this, the Pnimis Eros, because eventually that's all what I want. That's what we want. So the person sometimes He wants a house, but he has to go through different steps. But the inner of the rotzen is the house at the end. The chitzoinus, mash'enki mashurak tofel ezedover, as opposed to something which is just secondary for something else. So you want it, but you want it for another person purpose. That's chitzoinus rotzen. Harein boy pnimius rotzen. There's no. He doesn't really want that. Kim chitzoinus rotzen levad. That's only the externality of the will, because in order to get to what he wants, he might need something else externally also. Likewise, we can understand above. The Neshamas Yisrael Shehema Tachlis, the souls of Yin, they're the goal. They're rooted in the inner will of Hashem. And the nations of the world, they're rooted from the external knowledge of Hashem as well. This is even umasa'ila. There's no purpose in them themselves. Ubefrat, the Rebbe says, haklipa, besitra achra, the klipa and the other side. Shekola kavona bahem. There's no goal. There's no. They don't want klipa sitra achra. The whole intention. Why does the klipa sitra achra? Who showed them yizgaber aleim lakafuloin, is the person should overpower them to subdue them. There's no goal in them themselves. Since their root is just the externalities of Hashem will alone, and this externality of Hashem will comes in the light that fills the world. The be'er hamemale, in the light that fills the world, yesh nisinas mokum l'davar shechutz mimenu. So there is room for something which is outside of Hashem. Lachein ein muzhorim ala shituf. That's why they're not warned against shituf, because in their level of emalekul almim, shituf is not a contradiction. Sheyesh mitzias shelamaylam hem. It's only through grasping and reflection, they know they know there is an entity which is beyond them. And from their energy, they say the God of the God, they recognize by understanding. But that level of Memalukul Almin does not negate, does not reject any Metzias. So they know there's a higher God. A person who violates sin is worse than Klipa of Sitra Achra. The Av Shagam Ze Madikoru Eloko Delakaya. Even though that they're calling him the God of a God, who avodah zorah, this is also idol worship. That's against Hashem's will, but that's Hashem's will, the way it comes down through Sebev Kulalmim. But they aren't connected to that will. They're not doing opposite of the level of Rotzin, which they have a connection. So yes, it's Avodah Zorah, but it's not, by their level, that's not the opposite of the will of Hashem at that level, because they only have a connection to that will, and in that will, it's okay to say Lekod Lekaya. Mashenkin Yisrael Ha'Iver Aveda, as opposed to a Yid who violates an Aveda. Since he's rooted in the inner will, even that exact same thing, it's not by the nations, that's not called rebelling. That's called rebelling. If a Yid would violate, even though a Yid will say that the God of the God, that would be rebelling against Hashem. Because that goes against the Shem's will, which he is tied to him. And is verbunden, which he is tied to. A Yid is tied to the Pnimis Rotzim. That's why he is worse than the klipa and sitra achra. V'nifred betachlis melakus. He is totally separated from godliness. It goes back. Yes. She says before that a yid be'etzem cannot do an aveda. Yes. Shebeteva kol Yisraelu, since this is a nature by all Yidden, shein neroitzev in yochel liyis nifred melakus, he doesn't want to and he's not able to be separate from godliness. Lochein in a shayach klal sheyaver aveda. That's why it doesn't apply. A person cannot do an aveda technically by himself. Lule haruach shtus, had it not been for that spirit of foolishness shemachas al emes that covers on the truth. Because of that spirit of foolishness, it appears to him that he doesn't become separated from godliness by doing this Aveda. So what is the test to show us that really he can't go against the will of Hashem, and he's only doing it because he thinks that it's not separating him from Hashem? Is the kasher yeshne ezu inyan, because when it comes to a matter, she'ein mokim litus v'lachshev she'ein nifret melakus, there's no place for mistakes and thinking that you're not separate from godliness. Hare oz, at that point, afilu kal shebekalim, even the light ones headed, light-headed, upachus beyoser, somebody who's a very low level, is standing with self-sacrifice, not to violate Hashem's will, bless His will. Because he knows that through the Aveda he becomes separated from godliness. The Middle Rebbe writes, even one who does so much bad, all Avedis of the world, even he, Moshe Nafshi Bepoil, will actually give his life away al Kiddush Hashem, to sanctify the name of Hashem. Because he knows he knows that he becomes separated from godliness. Can't do that under no circumstances. So what is the source for this connection that you can't? That comes because Yidden are rooted in Atzmus, which is higher than dividing, we said before. That's why it's by everyone. There's no dividing. Everybody has that level. It'll be by the greatest among the greatest, and by the lightest among the light-headed ones. Equally, everybody, it's the level of his chalk higher than his chalkus, so we all have that. And there's an additional point here. That also the lightheaded among the lightheaded, the Mesiris Nefesh, when he gets the movement of Mesiris Nefesh, every matter of his soul fit to this movement. Even just to speak and doing alone, even though he doesn't believe it, but it influences even what he speaks in his heart. Even what he speaks, even though he doesn't believe in it, he's not going to say against Hashem, even without believing in it, because this expands to all of the neshama. This is above the dividing. All the souls of it, all the powers of the souls are included, and they all stand in this level of Mesiris Nefesh. Okay, we'll leave it over here, and we'll be mamshich.